Hello and welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're grateful for each view and comment. Tell us, from which country or city are you watching today? We enjoy connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Iron Fortress. Lawrence Merritt, known to most as Law, was not a man built on compromise. At 42, he had carved his legacy with calloused hands and an unforgiving mind. The scars on his knuckles told stories of battles fought long before he became owner of Ironclad Security, the most elite private security firm in Boston. The December wind bit through his tailored overcoat as he left the office. Snow gathered on the shoulders of his 6'3" frame, melting against the heat that seemed to perpetually radiate from his body. His employees called it the Merritt burn, the intensity he carried like a second skin. Heading home early, "Boss?" asked Garrett Sullivan, his head of operations. The man had served with Law and the Rangers before joining his security business. "Anniversary," Law replied, checking his watch, a Rolex his wife Natalie had given him 5 years ago. 15 years. Hard to believe. Garrett's expression shifted subtly. Law caught it. He caught everything. "Something wrong?" "No, just surprised. Didn't think you were the anniversary type." Garrett's eyes dropped to his computer screen too quickly. Law lingered a moment longer than necessary. After 15 years in special operations and another 10 running a security company, he developed an uncanny ability to sense when something was off. But he dismissed it. Natalie was waiting, and despite his demanding nature, she'd never given him reason to doubt her. Their marriage was the one fortress he believed impenetrable. "See you Monday," he said, turning away. The drive to their colonial-style home in Newton took 30 minutes. Law used the time to mentally transition from the cutthroat business world to husband mode. Natalie deserved that much. She'd stood by him when he'd returned from his final deployment with nightmares and a temper he couldn't always control. She'd supported him when he started Ironclad with nothing but his military connections and a ruthless determination to succeed. As he turned onto his street, his phone buzzed. A text from his younger brother, "Russell, need to talk." "It's important." Law frowned. Russell, 10 years his junior, was the family screw-up, always in some kind of trouble. He silenced the phone. Whatever drama Russell had created could wait until after his anniversary. He pulled into the driveway of the home he and Natalie had renovated together. 3 bedrooms they'd never filled with children, a mutual decision after Law's childhood. Growing up with Vernon and Patricia Merritt had taught him families sometimes cause more pain than they're worth. The house was dark. Law checked his watch again, 7:30 p.m. Natalie's car wasn't in the driveway. He entered through the front door, calling her name. No answer. On the kitchen counter sat a note in her elegant handwriting. "Working late. Don't wait up. N." Law's jaw tightened. This wasn't like her. Not on their anniversary. He pulled out his phone and called her office at Boston General Hospital, where she worked as a neurologist. "Dr. Merritt left at 5, replied the night nurse. Law hung up without another word. The coil of suspicion that had started with Garrett's odd behavior tightened in his gut. He dialed Natalie's cell. It went straight to voicemail. That's when he noticed it. Her rarely used Chanel perfume lingering in the air. She'd been home recently and changed. Law moved through the house systematically, checking rooms with the precision of his military training. Nothing seemed out of place until he reached their bedroom. The closet door was ajar, and Natalie's overnight bag was missing. The uneasy feeling crystallized into something sharper. He opened her dresser drawer, several items gone. He checked the bathroom. Her essential toiletries missing. This wasn't a late night at work. This was something else. He sat on the edge of the bed, his mind racing through possibilities when his phone rang. Russell again. This time, Law answered. "I've been trying to reach you." Russell's voice was tight. "Law, there's something you need to know about Natalie." Chapter 2, Ruins. Law's hands gripped the steering wheel as he tore through the empty streets toward Russell's apartment in Cambridge. His brother's words had been cryptic but devastating. "I've seen Natalie with someone. Multiple times. I didn't want to believe it, but today I overheard them talking about leaving. Tonight. I'm sorry, Law." The streetlights cast intermittent glows across his face, highlighting the hard angles of his clenched jaw. He hadn't asked questions, Russell knew better than to make accusations without proof. Law parked haphazardly outside Russell's building and took the stairs two at a time. Russell opened the door before he could knock, his face pale. "Show me," Law demanded. Russell led him to a laptop. "I took these last week. I was at Bonder having lunch when I saw them." The photos showed Natalie sitting across from a man Law didn't recognize, tall, blonde, professionally dressed. In one image, the man's hand covered Natalie's on the table. "Who is he?" "His name is Alexander Voss. He's a pharmaceutical executive. I did some digging." Russell handed Law a folder. "They've been seen together for at least 6 months." Law flipped through public records and social media screenshots. Alexander Voss, 38, divorced, no children. Chief Marketing Officer at Helix Pharmaceuticals. "There's more," Russell said quietly. "Today I followed them to their meeting spot. I heard them talking about a property sale." "Your property, Law." Law's head snapped up. "What property?" "The lake house in New Hampshire. Your grandfather's place." The revelation hit him like a physical blow. The lake house had been in the Merritt family for 3 generations. His grandfather had willed it directly to Law, knowing how much it meant to him. It was the only place Law had felt safe as a child, the only location tied to happy memories. "That's not possible. Natalie can't sell it. It's not in her name." Russell slid another document across the table. "You made her your power of attorney 3 years ago when you were having those surgeries on your knee." Law remembered. He'd undergone 3 operations after an old military injury flared up. The power of attorney was meant to be temporary, but he'd never revoked it. It hadn't seemed necessary. "The sale closes tomorrow," Russell continued. "They're meeting tonight with some documents before they leave town. I overheard them at the cafe. They mentioned Gardner Street storage." "Where?" Law's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Unit 423. They rented it under her name." Law stood, his mind calculating, planning. "You have keys to this place?" Russell hesitated, then went to a drawer. "Got a buddy who works there." He handed over a key card. "Law, what are you going to do?" Law pocketed the card. "Nothing they don't deserve." As he turned to leave, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Merritt?" An authoritative voice asked. "This is Officer Reynolds with Boston PD. Sir, you need to come to your address. There's been an incident." Law's blood ran cold. "What kind of incident?" "I'm not at liberty to say over the phone, sir. Please come as soon as possible." Law ended the call and looked at Russell. "The police are in my house." Russell's eyes widened. "You think Natalie—" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." 20 minutes later, Law pulled into his driveway, now flanked by 2 police cruisers. As he approached the front door, he saw Natalie standing in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. Behind her stood his parents, Vernon and Patricia Merritt, who had supposedly been vacationing in Florida. His father stepped forward, gripping Law's arm with surprising strength for a man in his 70s. "Son, she didn't mean for it to go this far." Natalie whimpered, her voice barely audible. "Don't let him see the garage." Law shoved past them all, ignoring the protests of the officer who tried to block his path. He flung open the garage door and stopped dead. Russell lay on the concrete floor, blood pooling beneath his head. A uniformed officer knelt beside him, checking for vital signs and finding none. Next to Russell's body was a crowbar with distinctive handle markings. Law's crowbar, taken from the toolbox he kept in this very garage. "Mr. Merritt," the officer approached cautiously. "Your wife called us. She says she came home and found your brother like this. Do you have any idea what happened here?" Law's mind raced. The pieces didn't fit. Why would Russell be here? Why would he drive separately? And then it clicked. He wouldn't. This was staged. Law turned slowly to face Natalie, whose tears now seemed calculated rather than genuine. His parents' presence made even less sense, until he remembered they'd always favored Russell, always jumped to his defense. "Officer," Law said carefully, "I think you should know that my brother contacted me earlier about my wife's affair. I was just with him at his apartment in Cambridge." The officer frowned. "Sir, your wife says you've been unstable lately, angry about financial issues. She feared you might harm yourself or others." Law understood with crystal clarity. This wasn't just about an affair or selling the lake house. This was about framing him. They'd killed Russell. the only person who knew what they were planning, and set Law up to take the fall. As the officer began reading him his rights, Law caught sight of a small storage unit key that had fallen from Russell's pocket, partially hidden beneath his body. The same type Russell had given him minutes ago. He knew then what he had to do. The evidence that would exonerate him and condemn them was waiting at Gardner Street Storage. He just had to get to it. "I'd like to speak to my lawyer," he said, his voice eerily calm as the handcuffs closed around his wrists. Chapter 3: Foundation of Vengeance. The interrogation room at Boston Police Department headquarters held a familiar chill. Law had been in rooms like this before, but on the other side of the table. During his military career, he'd conducted enough interrogations to know every technique. Detective Malone, a veteran cop with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes, took the seat across from him. "Mr. Merritt, you're in a world of trouble." Law remained silent, his lawyer, Benjamin Hargrove, beside him. Ben was Ironclad's legal counsel and one of the few people Law genuinely trusted. "We have your crowbar with your fingerprints covered in your brother's blood," Malone continued. "Your wife and parents both state you've been increasingly paranoid, making accusations, threatening violence. Ask them about Gardner Street Storage, Unit 423, Law said evenly. The detective faltered. "What?" "My brother discovered my wife was having an affair with Alexander Voss. They were planning to sell my family property and leave town tonight. The evidence is in that storage unit." Malone studied him. "That's convenient. Check Russell's phone records. He called me twice tonight. Check the traffic cameras outside his Cambridge apartment building. You'll see me arriving and leaving. It's physically impossible for me to have killed him when your me says he died." Ben added, "We're requesting you verify Mr. Merritt's alibi before proceeding further." 3 hours later, Law was released. The traffic cameras had confirmed his story, and the medical examiner had placed Russell's time of death during Law's documented visit to Cambridge. It wasn't enough to arrest anyone else, but it was enough to clear him temporarily. "They'll try again," Ben warned as they left the station. "They've invested too much in this plan." Law nodded, his expression unreadable. "Give me everything you can on Alexander Voss. I want to know every skeleton in his closet. What about Natalie? Your parents?" Law's eyes were cold. They chose their side. While Ben made calls, Law drove to Gardner Street Storage. The facility was deserted at 2 a.m. He used Russell's key card to enter, then made his way to Unit 423. Inside, he found what he expected: boxes of documents, a laptop, and several flash drives. He took everything. In his hotel room, Law methodically went through the evidence. The documents revealed a sophisticated plan. Alexander Voss wasn't just having an affair with Natalie. He was using her to access confidential patient information for Boston General. Specifically, patients participating in clinical trials for experimental treatments from competing pharmaceutical companies. This industrial espionage had been going on for over a year. The Lake House sale was just part of their exit strategy. They'd planned to frame Law for Russell's murder, ensuring he couldn't come after them while they disappeared with the proceeds from selling his property and the payoff from Helix Pharmaceuticals. Most damning of all was a series of text messages between Natalie and Voss, discussing how to handle Russell after he confronted them with his suspicions. Law's parents' involvement became clear too. Financial records showed large transfers from Voss to their accounts. They'd been paid to corroborate Natalie's story about Law's supposed instability. By morning, Law had compiled enough evidence to have them all arrested. But as the sun rose over Boston, he put the incriminating files aside. The legal system would give them deals, reduced sentences, perhaps even immunity for testimony. That wasn't good enough. They had taken everything from him: his brother, his marriage, his family legacy. They had tried to take his freedom. A conventional punishment wouldn't balance those scales. Law picked up his phone and called Garrett Sullivan. "I need the team," he said simply. "All of them. It's time to go to work." When Garrett arrived at the hotel with 5 other former special operators, men who had served with Law and now worked for Ironclad, Law laid out what had happened. "So what's the plan, boss?" asked Diego Contreras, Law's surveillance expert. Law unfolded a map of Boston. "We're not going to kill them. That's too quick, too clean." His finger traced a route across the city. "We're going to destroy them. piece by piece. Everything they care about, everything they are. He looked up at the men who had followed him through war zones and now stood ready to follow him through this personal hell. By the time we're done, they'll wish they were dead. Chapter 4. The Architect's Design. 3 weeks passed. Law moved through the world like a ghost, watching his targets establish their new normal. They believed they were safe. Natalie had returned home after Law's release, maintaining her innocence while secretly communicating with Voss. His parents had gone back to Florida, confident the police would eventually find evidence against their eldest son. They were all wrong. Law had rented an apartment under a false name, converting the spare bedroom into an operations center. The walls were covered with photographs, timelines, and connection maps, a meticulous blueprint for dismantling 5 lives. Surveillance is complete, Diego reported, entering with a fresh stack of photos. Voss follows the same routine every day. Natalie's been careful, but they're meeting at the Marriott twice a week. Law pinned the new images to the wall. And my parents? Your father's gambling again. For trips to the casino this week. Your mother's spending the money as fast as he loses it. Law nodded, unsurprised. His father's gambling addiction had destroyed their family finances decades ago. It seemed old habits returned quickly when cash was available. Garrett entered, carrying coffee. Hospital board meeting minutes, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Natalie's up for department chair next month. The vote looks favorable. Law opened the folder. Not for long. The final member of the team, Calvin Reese, arrived with a laptop. I've finished analyzing Voss's financial records. He's leveraged to the hilt. The money he promised your parents was supposed to come from a bonus that's now in jeopardy. Helix is investigating data irregularities. Law smiled for the first time in weeks. Perfect. The men gathered around the table as Law outlined Phase 1. Calvin, I want everything Voss gave my parents back in their accounts by morning, plus an additional $50,000. Make it look like he's getting nervous, trying to buy more loyalty. Won't be a problem, Calvin replied. He'd been NSA before joining Law's team. Diego, I need photos of my father at the casino, my mother shopping, and the money transfers. Deliver them to Voss's private email with a message suggesting my parents are becoming a liability. Consider it done. Law turned to Garrett. It's time to introduce Dr. Reynolds to the hospital board. The following day, an anonymous package arrived at Boston General Hospital addressed to the board of directors. Inside was a detailed dossier documenting how Dr. Natalie Merritt had accessed confidential patient files outside her department, files connected to clinical trials from pharmaceutical companies competing with Helix. Simultaneously, an SEC whistleblower report was filed against Alexander Voss, detailing suspicious stock transactions timed perfectly with the release of competitors' trial results. That evening, Law watched from his car as Natalie emerged from the hospital, her face ashen. Her phone rang. Voss, no doubt, experiencing his own professional implosion. Law didn't need to hear the conversation to know its content. Panic, accusations, the first cracks in their alliance. He followed Natalie to a bar where she met Voss. Through the window, he watched their heated exchange, saw Voss grab her arm too tightly, noticed how she pulled away with newfound fear in her eyes. Phase 1 was complete. Doubt had been planted. 2 days later, Natalie received another package, this one at home. Inside were photos of Voss meeting with Law's parents, handing over an envelope. The timestamp showed it was after Russell's murder. A note read, "Who do you think he'll sacrifice first?" Meanwhile, Voss found his corporate credit cards suddenly maxed out with charges at escort services. His ex-wife received documentation of undisclosed assets from their divorce. The IRS received an anonymous tip about offshore accounts. Law orchestrated it all with cold precision, each move designed to isolate his targets, turn them against each other, and systematically dismantle the foundations of their lives. "They're crumbling," Garrett observed as they watched Natalie and Voss argue in the Marriott parking lot a week later. "She slapped him." Law nodded. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. The next morning, Detective Malone received a package containing partial evidence from the storage unit. Enough to reopen the investigation into Russell's death, but not enough to immediately arrest anyone. When police arrived at Voss's office with questions, security footage showed him become physically ill, vomiting in a trash can before fleeing the building. That night, Natalie didn't come home. Law's parents called her repeatedly, leaving increasingly frantic messages. They could sense the tide turning. Law watched from the shadows as his carefully constructed demolition plan executed flawlessly. The architect of their destruction remained invisible while they tore each other apart brick by brick. Chapter 5. The Excavation. 1 month into his campaign, Law decided it was time to dig deeper. Surface destruction wasn't enough. He needed to expose the foundations. "What do we know about Voss before Helix?" he asked his team. Calvin pulled up a series of documents. He worked for 3 pharmaceutical companies in 5 years. Left each one under unusual circumstances. Unusual how? Nothing official in his record, but I found sealed court documents. Calvin opened a file. 2 sexual harassment settlements and 1 accusation of data manipulation that was dropped when the witness suddenly recanted. Law absorbed this information. Find the witnesses. All of them. Within days, they had names and locations. The sexual harassment victims, both former administrative assistants, had signed NDAs with substantial payouts. The data manipulation whistleblower had left the industry entirely, now teaching high school chemistry in New Hampshire. Law dispatched Diego to approach the teacher, Nathan Browning, while he personally visited the first harassment victim, Melissa Davidson. He found her working at a small marketing firm in Providence. When he introduced himself, her reaction told him everything. "I have nothing to say about Alexander Voss," she said, voice tight with anxiety. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Law assured her. "I'm here because he's hurting more people." Her resistance crumbled slowly as Law explained the situation, carefully omitting his relationship to the players involved. He presented himself as a private investigator working with other victims. "The NDA doesn't protect criminal behavior," he reminded her gently. "And you wouldn't be alone this time." By the end of their conversation, she'd agreed to contact the other victim and consider coming forward. Meanwhile, Diego reported success with Nathan Browning. "He's been waiting for this moment," Diego said. "Says Voss falsified clinical trial data that could have harmed patients. He only recanted because Voss threatened his family." Law added these new threads to his web. "Get them all to Detective Malone. Anonymous tips, but credible ones." While the police investigation intensified, Law turned his attention to Natalie. Her professional reputation was already damaged by the board's investigation, but he wanted to understand what had transformed the woman he thought he knew into someone capable of murder. Calvin discovered the answer in her email archives. Years of correspondence between Natalie and Voss predated their affair. They'd known each other since medical school, maintained contact through mutual colleagues, and reconnected at a conference 18 months ago. More disturbing were draft emails Natalie had never sent, journal entries she'd typed but never published. They revealed a woman who had grown to resent her husband's intensity, his absolutism, his uncompromising nature. She'd felt trapped in his shadow, her own ambitions secondary to his. Law read these private thoughts without emotion, analyzing them as he would intelligence reports on an enemy combatant. The woman who had written these words was a stranger to him now. The final piece fell into place when Calvin uncovered Voss's financial motives. His lavish lifestyle had left him deeply in debt. The industrial espionage at Boston General had been his idea, with promises of executive promotion and bonuses once the stolen research helped Helix outperform competitors. Law's parents were simpler. They'd always favored Russell and resented Law's success after they'd repeatedly predicted his failure. The money was just a bonus on top of helping their preferred son. As for Russell's murder, the evidence suggested an opportunistic decision rather than a long-planned action. Russell had confronted them at the wrong moment, threatened to expose everything, and Voss had reacted violently. Natalie and his parents had helped cover it up, seeing a chance to solve multiple problems at once by framing Law. With the complete picture now clear, Law finalized Phase 3, the controlled demolition. First, he anonymously delivered Voss's hidden offshore account details to Helix's board of directors, the SEC, and the FBI simultaneously. Next, he arranged for Natalie's private journal entries, the ones expressing her resentment, to reach Voss through an untraceable email, suggesting Natalie was preparing to cooperate with authorities and blame everything on him. For his parents, he sent financial records showing Voss had been transferring funds back out of their accounts. A manipulation by Calvin, but they wouldn't know that. Then he waited, watching the inevitable implosion through surveillance cameras Diego had planted. Voss confronted Natalie at her office, accusing her of betrayal. Their argument became so heated that hospital security intervened, creating an official incident report. Law's parents called Voss repeatedly, demanding explanations for the missing money. When he refused to answer, they panicked and booked flights back to Boston. The trap was set. All the principal players would soon be in one location, each believing the others had betrayed them, each desperate to save themselves. Law looked at the chaos he had orchestrated and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The excavation was complete. Now it was time to collapse the entire structure. Chapter 6. The cornerstones crumble. The breaking point came faster than even Law had anticipated. Alexander Voss was arrested outside his apartment, building on securities fraud charges. The FBI had moved quickly on the evidence they'd received. Law watched from across the street as Voss was led away, still wearing pajama bottoms with his hastily donned dress shirt. Within hours, news of the arrest reached Natalie. Law observed through the surveillance equipment as she frantically packed a suitcase, making calls that went unanswered. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing, and her accomplices were nowhere to be found. His parents arrived in Boston that afternoon, checking into a downtown hotel rather than going to Law's house where Natalie still lived. Their distrust was growing. All these developments pleased Law, but it wasn't enough. They were scattering, each looking to escape individually. He needed them together for his final act. "It's time for me to make contact," he told his team that evening. Garrett frowned. "You sure that's wise? Right now, they think you're oblivious." Law checked his watch. "That changes tonight." At precisely 8 p.m., Law called his parents' hotel room. "Hello, Father," he said when Vernon answered. The silence that followed was deafening. "Lawrence," Vernon finally managed, voice shaking. "We've been worried about you." "No, you haven't," Law replied evenly. "But you should be now." Before Vernon could respond, Law continued. "I know everything. About Russell. About Natalie and Voss. About the money. And I have proof. Son, you're confused. I'm meeting Natalie at the lake house tomorrow at noon. You and Mother should be there too. One chance to explain yourselves before I take everything to Detective Malone." He hung up without waiting for a response, then sent Natalie a text message. "I know about Voss. Meet me at the lake house tomorrow at noon if you want a chance to explain before I go to the police." His final call was to Voss's attorney, informing him that he had evidence proving Voss had murdered Russell Merritt and framed Lawrence Merritt for the crime. He offered to bring this evidence to the lake house at noon the following day, suggesting it might help with bail negotiations. The pieces were in motion. The next morning, Law's team established positions around the lake house. The remote property, situated on 20 wooded acres with its own dock on Lake Winnipesaukee, offered perfect isolation for what would follow. Law entered alone at 11 a.m., carrying a briefcase containing the complete evidence of their crimes. He set it on the large oak dining table, the same table where his grandfather had taught him to play chess, where he'd learned that sometimes you had to sacrifice pieces to win the game. Natalie arrived first, 30 minutes early, hoping to speak to Law alone. She froze when she saw him standing by the fireplace, his expression unreadable. "Law," she began, her voice attempting warmth while her eyes darted nervously. "Thank you for giving me a chance to explain." He didn't respond, merely gesturing toward a chair. She sat, clutching her purse like a shield. "I know how this looks, but Alex and it wasn't planned. It just happened. And then things got complicated with his work, and—" "Stop lying," Law said quietly. "I know everything. The patient files, the insider trading. Russell." The color drained from her face. "Russell was an accident. Alex got angry, they fought. In my garage? With my crowbar? That's quite an accident." Before she could fabricate more excuses, the door opened again. Vernon and Patricia entered, faltering when they saw Natalie already there. "Sit down," Law commanded, and his parents obeyed instinctively. Minutes later, a luxury SUV pulled into the driveway. Alexander Voss had made bail. He entered cautiously, surprise registering when he saw the assembled group. "What is this?" he demanded. Law smiled without humor. "This is Judgment Day." He opened the briefcase, removing 5 identical folders. He placed one in front of each person, keeping one for himself. Inside, you'll find comprehensive documentation of your crimes: securities fraud, industrial espionage, conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice. The accusations hung in the air like smoke. The police have received copies as well, but with a time delay. They'll arrive in approximately. He checked his watch. 1 hour. Panic erupted. Voss lunged for the door, only to find it blocked by Garrett. Natalie began sobbing. Vernon turned purple with rage, while Patricia seemed to shrink in her chair. "Why are you doing this?" Natalie cried. "If you know everything, why not just let the police handle it?" Law's expression hardened. "Because the legal system might show mercy. I won't." He retrieved a remote control from his pocket and pressed a button. The large television screen on the wall activated, showing footage of Russell confronting Voss and Natalie at the storage unit. The argument escalated until Voss struck Russell with the crowbar. The murder captured in horrifying clarity. "You recorded it," Voss whispered, staggered. "Russell did," Law corrected. "My brother was smarter than you gave him credit for. He suspected you might try something, so he set up a camera. His final gift to me." This was a lie. Calvin had created the footage using deepfake technology and footage from the storage facility security cameras, but they couldn't know that. "What do you want?" Vernon finally asked, his arrogance crumbling. Law sat at the head of the table, folding his hands. "I want you to destroy each other." He pushed a document toward the center of the table. "This is a confession for Russell's murder. One of you needs to sign it in the next 30 minutes, or all of you go down together." "You're insane," Voss spat. Law leaned forward. "No, I'm giving you a chance one of you doesn't deserve. 4 people in this room were involved in killing my brother and framing me. One of you actually wielded the crowbar. That person should pay the most severe price." He let the implication hang. One confession might lead to a deal. Collective denial would damn them all equally. The psychological trap was elegant in its simplicity. Law had designed it to exploit the fractures he'd been creating for weeks. Now, under pressure, those fractures would become chasms. It began with accusations. Voss claiming Natalie had suggested framing Law, Natalie insisting the murder was entirely Voss's idea, Vernon and Patricia protesting they'd only helped afterward out of fear. As the minutes ticked by, the accusations grew more specific, more damning. Details emerged that even Law hadn't known. How Natalie had given Voss the garage code, how his mother had suggested using Law's crowbar, how his father had helped position Russell's body. Law recorded everything, adding new evidence to their collective doom while watching the people who had betrayed him tear each other apart. When police sirens sounded in the distance, genuine panic set in. Voss grabbed the confession, scrawling his name with a caveat that the others had been equal participants. Natalie lunged for it, trying to add her own version. Vernon attempted to flee through the back door, only to be stopped by Diego. As officers surrounded the house, Law stood calmly. His revenge wasn't in seeing them arrested. That was merely justice. His revenge was in watching them betray each other as thoroughly as they had betrayed him, destroying any chance of unified defense or mitigated sentences. He had orchestrated their complete destruction, and as Detective Malone led them away in handcuffs, their faces contorted with hatred for each other rather than for him. Law knew his vengeance was complete. Or so he thought. Chapter 7. The Inspection. 6 months passed. The trial of Alexander Voss for the murder of Russell Merritt dominated Boston media. Natalie and Law's parents faced lesser charges as accessories, each with separate attorneys throwing the others under the proverbial bus. Law testified clinically, describing the frame-up attempt without emotion. The jury took only 4 hours to convict Voss. He received life without parole. Natalie accepted a plea deal for 20 years. Vernon and Patricia Merritt, despite their advanced age, were sentenced to 15 years each. Justice had been served, but Law felt no closure. He stood on the dock of the lake house, watching the sunset paint the water crimson. The property that had nearly been stolen from him now felt tainted by their betrayal. He'd considered selling it, but couldn't bring himself to part with his grandfather's legacy. Garrett approached, footsteps creaking on the wooden planks. "It's over, boss. You won." Law didn't turn. "Then why doesn't it feel like victory?" "Because you lost too much in the process." This simple truth hung between them. Law had destroyed his enemies, but they had taken parts of him first: his marriage, his brother, his faith in family. "The team's worried about you," Garrett continued. "You've been different since the trial." Law finally faced his friend. "I've been efficient, focused. You've been obsessed. Ironclad is thriving, but you're working 20-hour days, sleeping on your office couch. That's not living, Law. That's existing." Law had no answer for this. Since the trial, he'd poured himself into ironclad security, expanding operations, pursuing government contracts with relentless determination. The company had doubled in size, but as Garrett implied, success felt hollow. "I have a proposition," Garrett said. "The government contract in Kiev. Send me instead. Take some time off." Law frowned. "I don't need time off." "Yes, you do. You need to figure out what comes next. The vengeance chapter is finished. What's the next chapter about?" The question lingered as Garrett left Law alone with his thoughts. That night, Law dreamed of Russell for the first time since his death. They were fishing on the lake, as they had done as children. Dream Russell looked at him with sad eyes. "You got them, big brother. But at what cost?" Law woke before dawn, the question echoing. He drove back to Boston in silence, his mind churning. At the office, he found Calvin working early, as usual. "I need information," Law said without preamble. Calvin nodded, unsurprised. "On who?" "Alexander Voss. Everything before Boston. Family, relationships, business dealings. I thought we were done with him. There's something missing. A piece I never found." Calvin hesitated, then nodded. "I'll dig deeper. What exactly are we looking for?" "I don't know yet," Law admitted. But Voss was too confident, too protected. Someone was watching his back. While Calvin worked, Law reviewed the trial transcripts. Something had bothered him during Voss's testimony. A reference to a mentor who had guided his career, someone powerful enough to make problems disappear. The name had never been mentioned, dismissed by the prosecutor as irrelevant to the murder charge. 3 days later, Calvin brought the answer. "Philip Donovan," he said, dropping a file on Law's desk. "CEO of Meridian Pharmaceuticals. He's been Voss's shadow benefactor for 15 years. Law opened the file. Philip Donovan, 65, had built Meridian from a small research outfit into a pharmaceutical giant. His company had acquired or destroyed numerous competitors through methods that occasionally skirted legality, but never quite crossed the line into provable criminality. What's the connection to Voss? Voss was engaged to Donovan's daughter Catherine during graduate school. The engagement ended, but Donovan kept Voss in his orbit. I found a pattern. Wherever Voss worked, Meridian benefited from insider information. Law studied Donovan's photograph, distinguished, silver-haired, with cold eyes that reminded him uncomfortably of his own father. Donovan visited Voss in jail 3 times before the trial, Calvin continued, always as legal counsel to avoid recordings. The missing piece clicked into place. Voss hadn't been working alone. He'd been Donovan's proxy. The industrial espionage, the data theft from Boston General, it had all served Meridian's interests. Donovan let Voss take the fall, Law mused. Sacrificed him when he became a liability. Like a good chess player, Calvin agreed, knowing Law's fondness for the game. Law made his decision. I want everything on Donovan. Family, finances, weaknesses. You're not done, are you? Calvin asked quietly. Justice isn't complete, Law replied. The man who truly benefited from Russell's death is still free. The investigation into Philip Donovan consumed the next month. Law approached it methodically, building a comprehensive profile of the man who had manipulated Voss and indirectly caused Russell's death. The picture that emerged was of a brilliant but ruthless businessman who viewed people as assets to be used and discarded. His daughter Catherine had left the country after breaking her engagement to Voss, establishing a medical practice in Switzerland. His wife had died under mysterious circumstances 15 years earlier. His son Michael worked reluctantly in Meridian's legal department. Most importantly, Law discovered Donovan's vulnerability, an experimental treatment for early-onset Alzheimer's being developed in secret. Donovan had been diagnosed 3 years earlier, but had kept the condition hidden while pursuing aggressive treatment options, including using stolen research for Boston General's clinical trials. The final piece fell into place when Calvin uncovered communications between Donovan and Natalie dating back before her affair with Voss. She had been Donovan's inside person at the hospital before Voss re-entered the picture. She was playing both sides, Law realized, using Voss to cover her tracks with Donovan. With this knowledge, Law formulated a new plan, not for vengeance this time, but for justice. Philip Donovan needed to answer for his role in the conspiracy that had killed Russell. But unlike his previous campaign, Law would not operate in the shadows. This time, he would bring Donovan into the light. Chapter 8. The Reinforcement. Law's approach to Philip Donovan required a different strategy than he'd used with Voss and the others. Donovan was too powerful, too insulated to be destroyed through conventional means. We need leverage, Law told his team. But more importantly, we need public exposure. The plan centered around Donovan's hidden Alzheimer's diagnosis and the illegal means he'd employed to obtain treatment. If they could prove Meridian had stolen research and compromised clinical trials, the scandal would destroy both Donovan and his company. We need someone on the inside, Garrett observed. Law nodded. Michael Donovan, the son. Michael Donovan presented an opportunity, a reluctant participant in his father's empire, a man who had chosen law over medicine to please his father but harbored resentment over the direction of the company. Law arranged a seemingly chance meeting at a charity gala both were attending. As they discussed the pharmaceutical industry's ethical challenges, Law carefully steered the conversation toward Meridian's practices without revealing his true interest. The line between aggressive research and patient exploitation has become blurred, Michael commented, his tone suggesting personal concern. Law recognized an opening. Some would say Meridian crossed that line with the Alzheimer's trials. Michael stiffened slightly. What do you know about those trials? Enough to be concerned, Law replied, particularly about where the research originated. Their conversation ended with an agreement to meet again privately. Law had planted the seed. Now he needed to nurture it into full disclosure. Over the following weeks, Law cultivated a careful relationship with Michael, positioning himself as a potential ally rather than an adversary. He shared selective information about Voss's industrial espionage without revealing his personal connection to the case. The breakthrough came during their fourth meeting. My father is dying, Michael confided after several drinks. The treatments bought him time, but they're failing now. His mind is going, and he's becoming desperate. Desperate enough to compromise patient safety? Law asked carefully. Michael's silence was answer enough. I can help you stop him, Law offered. But I need evidence. The decision visibly weighed on Michael. Family loyalty battled with professional ethics. Finally, he nodded. Give me a week. 6 days later, Michael delivered a flash drive containing internal Meridian documents that confirmed everything. The theft of Boston General's research, the compromised clinical trials, and most damning, direct communication between Philip Donovan and Natalie Merritt establishing their arrangement before Voss became involved. What will you do with this? Michael asked, clearly conflicted. What should have been done months ago? Law replied. The truth needs to come out. Law's team verified the document's authenticity before proceeding. The evidence was irrefutable. Philip Donovan had orchestrated the entire operation, using Voss and Natalie as disposable pawns. When complications arose, he had abandoned them to their fate, protecting himself and Meridian from fallout. With the evidence secured, Law moved to Phase 2, reinforcing justice. First, he delivered comprehensive documentation to the FBI, SEC, and FDA simultaneously. The evidence detailed Meridian's criminal activities without revealing Law's personal connection or Michael's involvement. Next, he arranged for key documents to reach medical ethics boards and patient advocacy groups, ensuring the scandal couldn't be quietly handled through financial settlements. Finally, he contacted Catherine Donovan in Switzerland, sharing evidence of her father's criminal activities and the destruction left in his wake. Though they never spoke directly, her response came in the form of a statement to prosecutors, confirming what she had witnessed during her engagement to Voss. The Donovan empire began to crumble. Meridian's stock plummeted as federal investigations were announced. Clinical trials were suspended pending review. Philip Donovan was forced to step down as CEO while the board attempted damage control. Law watched the collapse from a distance, finding no satisfaction in Donovan's downfall, only a sense that the scales of justice were finally balancing. When federal agents arrived at Donovan's estate to execute search warrants, Law observed from his car across the street. The once powerful man who emerged between FBI agents appeared diminished, confused, his Alzheimer's symptoms apparently accelerating under stress. That evening, Law received an unexpected call from Detective Malone. "Voss is talking," Malone said without preamble, claiming Donovan was the mastermind all along. "Says your brother figured it out, and that's why he had to die. Is that going to help Voss?" Law asked, his voice neutral. "No, but it might extend Natalie's sentence." She knew more than she admitted. After they hung up, Law sat in silence, processing this final confirmation. The justice system was now addressing what his revenge had not: the full scope of responsibility for Russell's death. The next morning, Michael Donovan requested a meeting. They sat at a quiet corner table in an empty restaurant. "My father tried to kill himself last night," Michael said, his expression haunted. He left a confession. "It's comprehensive." Law absorbed this without visible reaction. "I'm sorry it came to this." Michael studied him. "You're not who I thought you were when we met. This wasn't just about corporate whistleblowing for you, was it?" "No," Law admitted. "But my reasons don't change the truth of what your father did." He mentioned someone named Russell in his confession. Said he authorized Voss to handle the problem when Russell threatened exposure. Law's composure nearly broke at hearing his brother's name. "Russell was my brother. Voss murdered him on your father's implicit authorization." Understanding dawned in Michael's eyes. "You orchestrated all of this. The investigations, the exposure. Justice needed reinforcement." Michael didn't argue the point. Instead, he asked, "What happens now?" "Now justice takes its course," Law replied. "Your father faces consequences for his actions. Meridian either reforms or dissolves. The people harmed by stolen research get answers. And you?" Michael pressed. "What do you get?" Law considered the question. "Closure," he finally said, though he wasn't certain he believed it. Chapter 9. The Foundation Stands. 1 year after Russell's murder, Law stood before his brother's grave. The cemetery was quiet in the early morning light, dew glistening on the granite headstone. "It's done," Law said softly. "All of them are paying for what they did to you." Philip Donovan had died awaiting trial, his Alzheimer's accelerated by stress and the cessation of experimental treatments. Meridian Pharmaceuticals had been dismantled, its legitimate assets sold to competitors, its tainted research discredited. Natalie, following additional charges related to her collaboration with Donovan, had received an extended sentence. She would be in her 60s before release. Law's parents remained incarcerated, their appeals denied. They had written to him several times, seeking forgiveness as their health declined in prison. Those letters remained unopened in his desk drawer. Justice had been served, comprehensive and uncompromising. Yet standing at Russell's grave, Law still felt incomplete. "You'd probably tell me to move on," he continued, placing a hand on the cool stone. "You always were better at that part." The wind rustled through nearby trees, a sound that had always brought Law peace at the lake house. He had finally decided to keep the property, renovating it to remove the stain of betrayal while preserving his grandfather's legacy. As he turned to leave, he noticed a woman standing nearby, mid-30s, professionally dressed, watching him with an uncertain expression. "Mr. Merritt," she said as he approached. "I'm Dr. Harper Browning." I worked with your brother at Mass General. Law vaguely recalled Russell mentioning a colleague named Harper. You were in the research department. She nodded. Russell and I were collaborating on something before he died. Something important. Law studied her, assessing. What kind of something? A treatment protocol for PTSD in combat veterans. Russell was passionate about it because of your military background. He said if we could help even one soldier suffer less than his brother had, it would be worth it. The revelation hit Law like a physical blow. He'd known Russell was working in psychiatric research, but hadn't known the focus had been inspired by him. I've continued the work, Harper explained. We're ready for clinical trials, but funding is an issue since the Donovan scandal. Many pharmaceutical companies are hesitant to back psychiatric research right now. Why are you telling me this? Because Russell believed in this project, and he believed in you. Before he died, he told me if we ever hit a wall, you were the one person who could break through it. He said you never gave up on anything that mattered. Law absorbed this, hearing his brother's voice in her words. Send the research to my office. I'll have my team review it. She handed him a business card. Thank you for considering it. Russell will be grateful. As she walked away, Law felt something shift inside him, the first stirring of purpose beyond vengeance. 2 weeks later, Law called a meeting with his executive team at Ironclad. Garrett, Diego, and Calvin listened intently as he outlined his proposal. I want to establish a foundation in Russell's name, he explained, focused on innovative PTSD treatments for veterans. We'll fund the research directly. No pharmaceutical partnerships. Garrett leaned forward. This is the project his colleague brought you? Law nodded. It's promising work. More importantly, it's what Russell cared about. Ironclad has the resources, Calvin confirmed. But this would be a significant pivot from our current operations. Not a pivot, Law corrected. An expansion. We'll continue our security contracts while developing the foundation. Many of our employees are veterans who could benefit directly from this research. The team discussed logistics, funding mechanisms, and organizational structure. By meeting's end, the Russell Merritt Foundation for Combat Trauma Research had taken preliminary shape. In the months that followed, Law threw himself into establishing the foundation with the same intensity he'd once directed toward vengeance. He recruited top researchers, secured facilities, and personally interviewed veterans willing to participate in trials. Dr. Harper Browning agreed to lead the research team, bringing Russell's original vision to the project. Her dedication matched Law's own, creating a partnership that gradually evolved beyond professional collaboration. One evening, as they reviewed preliminary results in Law's office, Harper asked the question others had avoided. Do you ever regret how things ended with them? Your wife, your parents. Law considered this carefully. I regret that they forced those endings. I regret Russell paid the price for their choices. But I don't regret ensuring they face consequences. That's not forgiveness, she observed. No, he agreed. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Harper nodded, accepting his answer without judgment. Russell said you were the most principled person he'd ever known. Uncompromising in your convictions. Some would call that a flaw. Russell called it your foundation. He said when everything else crumbled, you would still be standing. The words resonated with unexpected power. Through all the destruction, the unraveling of his marriage, the loss of his family, the death of his brother, Law had indeed remained standing. Damaged but unbroken, his core principles intact. 2 years to the day after Russell's murder, Law returned to the lake house. The renovation was complete, erasing the physical reminders of betrayal while honoring the property's place in his family history. Garrett joined him on the dock, both men watching the sunset as they had many times before. The Foundation's first treatment protocol got FDA approval, Garrett noted. Russell would be proud. Law nodded, allowing himself to acknowledge the achievement. It's a start. You're never going to completely move on, are you? Garrett asked, not unkindly. No, Law admitted. But I'm moving forward. The distinction was important. Moving on implied forgetting, forgiving, releasing the past entirely. Law would never forgive those who had taken Russell from him, never forget their betrayal, never release them from accountability for their actions. But moving forward, that he could do, building something meaningful from the ruins of betrayal, honoring Russell's memory through work that mattered, finding purpose beyond vengeance. As darkness fell over the lake, Law made peace not with his enemies, but with himself. He had survived their best efforts to destroy him. He had ensured justice when the system might have failed. He had remained true to his nature, uncompromising, relentless, principled. The foundation of who he was remained unshaken. And on that foundation, he would build a future worthy of the brother he had lost. Not a future softened by forgiveness or weakened by compromise, but one strengthened by the unwavering conviction that had carried him through his darkest days. Some debts must be paid in full, some betrayals cannot be absolved, and true justice requires an unforgiving heart. Law Merritt would never be less than who he was, a man who did not forgive or forget, who exacted the full measure of consequence from those who betrayed him. That was his nature, his code, his foundation. And that foundation would stand. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Prescription for Truth. Alexander Whitehead sat in the leather passenger seat of his Mercedes, staring at the crumpled note in his trembling hands. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Dr. Raymond's clinic, but Alex felt nothing but cold dread washing over him. Your wife was here. File for divorce now. The handwriting was hurried, desperate. Alex looked back at the clinic where he'd just completed his annual physical. Dr. Tim Barry had been his physician for 15 years, but today something had been different. The usually jovial doctor had seemed distracted, avoiding eye contact, rushing through the examination with uncharacteristic haste. "Everything looks fine," Dr. Barry had said, his voice strained. But as Alex was leaving, the nurse, Janine Collier, a woman he'd known for over a decade, had slipped the folded paper into his hand with a meaningful look. Alex's vision blurred as the implications hit him. Desiree, his wife of 12 years, the woman he'd built an empire with, the mother of their 2 children, the woman he'd trusted with everything. His phone buzzed. A text from Desiree. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. Love you." The words felt like acid in his chest. Alexander Whitehead wasn't a man who broke easily. At 42, he'd built Whitehead Construction from nothing into a multi-million-dollar company. He'd survived his father's abandonment at 8, his mother's death at 19, and countless business battles that would have destroyed weaker men. But this felt different. He started the engine, his hands steady despite the storm in his mind. Whatever Desiree was planning, whatever had spooked Dr. Barry enough to risk his medical license, Alex would find out. And when he did, she would learn that Alexander Whitehead was not a man to be underestimated. 20 minutes later, Alex pulled into the circular driveway of their sprawling colonial home in Riverside Heights. The house stood as a testament to their success. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a 3-car garage, and enough land to provide privacy from prying neighbors. He'd bought it as a surprise for their 5th anniversary, remembering how Desiree had cried with joy. Now, as he looked at the pristine facade, he wondered how long those tears had been lies. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. Their children, Emma, 10, and Michael, 8, were at his sister's for the week, a summer tradition that suddenly felt convenient for whatever Desiree had planned. Alex moved through the house like a man seeing it for the first time. In his study, he poured 3 fingers of bourbon and sat behind his mahogany desk, the notes spread before him. His mind, sharpened by years of reading contracts and spotting deception in business deals, began to work. Why would Dr. Barry risk everything to warn him? What had Desiree discussed during her visit? And most importantly, what was she planning that required him to file for divorce immediately? The clock on his desk showed 6:47 p.m. Desiree wouldn't be home until after midnight if her pattern held true. That gave him time to think, to plan, to prepare for whatever storm was coming. Alex opened his laptop and began to type, his fingers moving with purpose. If Desiree Whitehead thought she could blindside the man who'd built an empire from nothing, she was about to learn a very painful lesson about underestimating Alexander Whitehead. Chapter 2. Unraveling Threads. The next morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Desiree hummed while making coffee, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile bright as summer. She wore a burgundy dress that hugged her curves, the same dress Alex had bought her for their anniversary last year. "Sleep well?" she asked, kissing his cheek. Her perfume, once intoxicating, now smelled cloying. Like a baby, Alex lied, knowing he'd spent the night researching divorce laws and asset protection. "You were quiet coming in. Didn't want to wake you. The Henderson Project is killing me." She sighed dramatically. "Honestly, sometimes I think about just walking away from it all." Alex watched her performance over his coffee cup. Desiree worked as an interior designer, a career she'd built after they married. Successful enough to be independent, not successful enough to walk away from his millions without consequence. "Maybe you should," he said carefully. "Take a break. We could travel." Something flickered in her eyes. Panic? Calculation? "Oh, I can't. Too many commitments." After she left for work, Alex made his first call. "Whitehead Construction, this is Sergio Meyer," his security chief answered. "Sergio, I need you at the house. Personal matter." Sergio Meyer had worked for Alex for 8 years, ever since leaving the police force under circumstances they'd never discussed. The man was built like a linebacker, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a loyalty that Alex had earned through respect rather than money. "On my way, boss." While waiting, Alex called his lawyer, Ross Tate, a shark in an expensive suit who'd helped him navigate countless business deals. "Ross, I need you to prepare something for me." Quietly. "What are we talking about?" "A prenup enforcement. Maybe divorce proceedings." "And Ross, I need you to look into Dr. Timothy Barry. See if he's had any malpractice issues, financial problems, anything that might make him vulnerable to pressure." Ross was quiet for a moment. "Alex, what's going on?" "I'm not sure yet, but when I figure it out, I want to be ready." Sergio arrived 30 minutes later, his presence filling the foyer. "What do you need?" Alex handed him a photo of Desiree. "I need to know where she goes, who she sees, what she does. Everything. And I need it done without her knowing." Sergio studied the photo, then Alex's face. "How deep you want me to go?" "As deep as necessary. Start with her office, but don't limit yourself there." "This about the note?" Alex's head snapped up. "What note?" "Boss, I've been doing security for your family for 8 years. I know Janine Collier. She's my cousin. She called me this morning, worried sick about what she did yesterday. The pieces clicked. She told you. Enough. Said your wife came to see Dr. Barry 3 days ago. Not for a medical appointment. She threatened him. Said if he didn't help her, she'd file a malpractice suit that would destroy him." Alex felt ice in his veins. "Help her with what?" "That's what we need to find out. But Janine said your wife left with some kind of paperwork. Medical records, maybe something else. Give me everything. Phone records, bank statements, credit card bills. I want to know every breath she's taken for the past 6 months." Sergio nodded grimly. "Consider it done. But boss, if she's planning what I think she might be planning." "What?" "You better move fast. Whatever she's got cooking, it's probably happening soon." As Sergio left, Alex's phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Mr. Whitehead?" The voice was shaky, elderly. "This is Dr. Barry. We need to talk." Chapter 3. The Doctor's Confession. They met at a diner 40 miles outside the city, a place where neither man would be recognized. Dr. Barry looked like he'd aged years since yesterday, his usually steady hands shaking as he stirred sugar into his coffee. "I should lose my license for this," he said without preamble. "Tell me what happened." Dr. Barry exhaled heavily. "Your wife came to see me 3 days ago. Not as a patient, as a threat. She had photos." "What kind of photos?" "Me and a former patient. Sandra Valentine. It was years ago, after my divorce. Sandra was struggling with depression, needed someone to talk to. One thing led to another." He looked up miserably. "It was completely inappropriate. I ended it after 2 weeks, but your wife somehow found out." Alex felt a piece of the puzzle click into place. She was blackmailing you. She wanted me to falsify your medical records. Said you've been experiencing symptoms, memory loss, confusion, paranoia. She wanted documentation that would support a claim of early-onset dementia or mental instability. The coffee cup cracked in Alex's grip. She wanted me declared incompetent. It gets worse. She also wanted me to prescribe you medication, antipsychotics that would actually cause the symptoms she wanted documented. Said she'd been crushing them into your food for weeks. The room spun. Alex thought about the headaches, the occasional dizziness he'd attributed to stress. Jesus Christ. I refused at first, but she showed me the photos, said she'd destroy my practice, my reputation. I have grandchildren, Mr. Whitehead. I couldn't, but you did refuse. That's why Janine warned me. Dr. Barry nodded. I gave her the falsified records yesterday, but I couldn't go through with the medication part. That's when Janine stepped in. She said she couldn't watch me destroy an innocent man. Alex's phone buzzed. A text from Sergio. Found something. Meet me at the office. Now. Dr. Barry, I need you to write down everything you just told me. Every detail. And I need copies of whatever you gave my wife. I can't. You can and you will. Because if you don't help me stop this, what happens next will make losing your license look like a parking ticket. 30 minutes later, Alex burst into his construction office. Sergio was waiting with a laptop and a grim expression. Boss, your wife's been busy. Look at this. The laptop screen showed a bank account Alex had never seen before. Desiree's name was on it, along with someone else's, Wesley Wilcox. Who's Wesley Wilcox? Paralegal at the law firm of Bright and Associates. Apparently, he's been helping your wife prepare for something big. Look at the deposits. Alex scanned the numbers. Over the past 6 months, Desiree had been moving money, small amounts from her joint accounts, cash from her business, even taking out personal loans. The total was approaching $200,000. There's more, Sergio continued. I ran surveillance on her office today. She never went there. Instead, she met with this guy. He pulled up a photo of a man in his 30s, lean and well-dressed, getting into a car with Desiree. Wesley Wilcox. The very same. And here's the kicker. I followed them to a storage unit on the east side. They were moving boxes. Lots of them. Alex stared at the evidence, his mind racing. The falsified medical records, the secret bank account, the mysterious storage unit. Desiree wasn't just planning to leave him. She was planning to destroy him. Sergio, I need you to find out everything about this Wesley Wilcox. Background, financials, weaknesses. Everything. Already on it. Boss, there's something else. I ran a background check on your wife's recent activities. 3 weeks ago, she met with a private investigator named Clayton Knapp. Guy's got a reputation for playing dirty. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was uglier than Alex had imagined. His wife hadn't just fallen out of love with him. She'd been planning his systematic destruction for months. But Alexander Whitehead hadn't built an empire by backing down from fights. As he looked at the evidence spread before him, a cold smile spread across his face. Sergio, how do you feel about turning the tables on some very bad people? Boss, I thought you'd never ask. Chapter 4. The Art of War. The storage unit was located in an industrial district where questions weren't asked and security cameras were conveniently broken. Alex and Sergio sat in an unmarked van at 2 a.m., watching the facility through night vision scopes. Motion sensor on Unit 247, Sergio whispered. Someone's coming. A black sedan pulled up, and 2 figures emerged, Desiree and Wesley Wilcox. Even in the green glow of night vision, Alex could see their body language. Intimate, familiar. They moved like lovers who'd been together for months. How long do you think this has been going on? Alex asked. Based on the financial records? At least a year. Maybe longer. They watched as Desiree and Wesley entered the storage unit. Lights spilled out, illuminating stacks of boxes and filing cabinets. They're not just stealing your money, Sergio observed. They're building a case against you. Look. Through the open door, they could see Wesley photographing documents while Desiree organized files. It was methodical, professional. We need to see what's in there, Alex said. I've got a better idea. Remember that private investigator your wife hired? Clayton Knapp. What about him? I had a chat with him today. Turns out, Mr. Knapp has some expensive gambling debts. The kind that get people's legs broken if they don't pay up. Alex turned to look at his security chief. You bought him? For the low price of $50,000 and a promise to clear his debts. Mr. Knapp was very eager to tell me what your wife hired him to do. Sergio pulled out a manila folder. She wanted dirt on you. Business irregularities, affairs, anything that could be used in a divorce proceeding. Problem is, you're cleaner than a whistle. So she told him to manufacture evidence. Jesus. Gets better. She also had him investigate your business partners, your employees, anyone with access to your finances. She was looking for someone she could frame for embezzlement. Alex felt a chill. Who? Your CFO? Ricardo Sampson. Apparently, he's got a sick daughter, mounting medical bills. Easy target for a frame job. Ricardo Sampson had worked for Alex for 6 years. The man was honest to a fault, devoted to his family, the kind of employee who'd work weekends without complaint. The thought of Desiree destroying his life as collateral damage in her scheme made Alex's blood boil. Where's Ricardo now? I called him in. He's at the office, working on those Henderson Project financials your wife keeps talking about. Alex's phone rang. The number made his stomach clench. It was Desiree. Where are you? Her voice was honey over steel. Home. Working in the study. Where are you? Office. The Henderson Project is driving me crazy. In the background, Alex could hear Wesley's voice, though not the words. When will you be home? Probably not until morning. This deadline is killing me. Alex looked at Sergio, who was grinning in the darkness. Okay, baby. Don't work too hard. Love you, she said, and the line went dead. She's good, Sergio admitted. If I didn't know better, I'd believe her myself. That's what makes this so perfect, Alex said. She thinks she's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. But she made one critical mistake. What's that? She assumed I was the same man who married her 12 years ago. The trusting fool who believed the best in people. Alex's voice was cold steel. She doesn't know what I've become. They drove back to the office in silence, Alex's mind working through possibilities. By the time they arrived, he had the beginnings of a plan. Ricardo Sampson was hunched over his computer, surrounded by coffee cups and financial statements. At 35, he looked older, worn down by worry about his daughter's medical bills. When Alex appeared, Ricardo looked up with tired eyes. Mr. Whitehead, I wasn't expecting you this late. Ricardo, we need to talk. About your daughter, about Desiree, and about someone who's trying to destroy both our lives. For the next hour, Alex laid out everything he discovered. Ricardo's face went through shock, anger, and finally determination. What do you need me to do? I need you to help me give them exactly what they want, Alex said. And when they take the bait, we're going to destroy them all. Chapter 5, The Perfect Frame. The Henderson Project files contained 3 years of financial records for Alex's largest commercial development, a $50 million shopping complex that had made Whitehead Construction a regional powerhouse. To most people, the files looked like standard accounting records. To someone planning a frame job, they were a gold mine of opportunity. She's been setting this up for months, Ricardo said, pointing to discrepancies he'd found. Look at these invoices. They're legitimate, but she's been making copies with altered amounts. Small changes, 5% here, 10% there. Alex studied the doctor paperwork. She plans to claim I've been skimming money and you've been helping me hide it. It's actually clever, Sergio admitted grudgingly. With a falsified medical record from Dr. Barry, she can claim you've been mentally unstable and making poor business decisions. The embezzlement charges would explain where the money went. And Ricardo takes the fall as my accomplice, Alex finished. She gets everything in the divorce. Ricardo goes to prison, and I end up in a mental health facility. There's more, Ricardo said grimly. I found evidence that someone's been accessing our system remotely. They've been downloading files for weeks. Alex's computer chimed with an incoming email. The sender was Wesley Wilcox, but the message was clearly from Desiree. Darling, I've been thinking about our future. Maybe it's time for a change. I've made some discoveries about the business that concern me. We should talk when you get home. She's moving to the end game, Sergio observed. Good, Alex said. So are we. Over the next 48 hours, Alex orchestrated his counterstrike with military precision. The first phase involved Clayton Knapp, the private investigator Sergio had bought. Knapp met them at a warehouse on the outskirts of town, nervous energy radiating from his thin frame. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I just need to clear my debts." "No trouble," Alex assured him. "Just tell me exactly what my wife asked you to do. She wanted me to plant evidence in your business accounts. Make it look like you've been moving money to offshore accounts. She gave me bank routing numbers, transaction dates, the whole package." "Did you do it?" "Not yet. She said to wait for her signal." Alex smiled. "Clayton, I want you to go ahead and plant that evidence." "Exactly as she asked." Knapp looked confused. "But trust me, and when she calls you tomorrow, I want you to tell her you found something else. Something that will make her very, very happy." The second phase involved Dr. Barry. The doctor had been a nervous wreck since their diner meeting, but Alex needed him functional for a few more days. "I want you to call my wife," Alex instructed. "Tell her you've completed the medication protocol she requested. Say I've been showing increased symptoms of confusion and paranoia." "But that's not true." "Exactly. That's what makes it perfect." The final phase was the most dangerous. Alex called Wesley Wilcox directly. "Mr. Wilcox? This is Alexander Whitehead. I think we need to have a conversation." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about." "Cut the shit, Wesley. I know about the storage unit, the bank account, and my wife's plans. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to meet me tomorrow night at the Riverside Hotel bar." "Alone? Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'm going to the State Bar Association with evidence of your involvement in fraud and blackmail. Your paralegal license will be the least of your worries." Another pause. "What do you want?" "To make you an offer you can't refuse." That evening, Alex sat in his study, watching Desiree through the doorway as she prepared dinner. She hummed while she worked, occasionally glancing at him with what looked like genuine affection. The performance was flawless. "You seem happy tonight," he observed. "Just thinking about our future," she said, echoing the email she'd sent. "Sometimes change can be good, don't you think?" "Absolutely. In fact, I've been making some changes of my own." Something flickered in her eyes. "Oh, I've decided to take your advice about the Henderson project. I'm going to step back, let Ricardo handle more of the day-to-day operations." "That's wonderful. You work too hard." As they ate dinner, Alex watched his wife of 12 years, searching for any sign of the woman he'd once loved. All he saw was a stranger wearing a familiar face, playing a role in a drama that was about to reach its explosive conclusion. "Desiree," he said softly. "Yes. Do you remember our wedding day? You said you'd never hurt me, no matter what happened between us." Her smile was radiant and completely false. "Of course I remember. And I meant every word." Alex nodded, cutting another piece of steak. "Good. I'm going to hold you to that." Chapter 6. The Devil's Bargain. The Riverside Hotel bar was dimly lit, filled with the kind of people who minded their own business. Alex sat in a corner booth, nursing a whiskey and watching Wesley Wilcox fidget with his martini. The younger man was trying to project confidence, but sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "So," Wesley began, "what exactly do you think you know?" Alex placed a manila folder on the table. "I know you've been sleeping with my wife for over a year. I know about the storage unit, the falsified documents, and the plan to have me declared mentally incompetent. I know about Clayton Knapp and the evidence he's about to plant in my business accounts." Wesley's face went pale. "You can't prove any of that." "Can't I?" Alex opened the folder, revealing photographs of Wesley and Desiree together, bank statements showing their joint account, and copies of the forged medical records. "I can prove all of it. What do you want?" "Information. I want to know the timeline, the end game, and who else is involved." Wesley drained his martini in one gulp. "You're out of your mind if you think I'm going to." "Let me stop you right there," Alex interrupted. "I've spent the last 2 days learning everything about you, Wesley. 28 years old, graduated law school with decent grades, but couldn't pass the bar exam. Working as a paralegal for Dennis Bright for 3 years, making $45,000 a year. You live in a studio apartment and drive a 15-year-old Honda Civic." Wesley's jaw tightened. So my wife promised you a share of my fortune. What, 10 million? 20? Enough to change your life forever. Alex leaned forward. But here's what she didn't tell you. Our prenup protects my business assets. Even if she succeeds in having me declared incompetent, she'd get the house, some investments, maybe $2 million total. You're lying. Am I? Did she show you the prenup? Did you read it yourself? Alex saw understanding dawn in Wesley's eyes. She's been playing you, Wesley. She gets revenge on me. You get to be the fall guy when this all comes crashing down. Alex pulled out another document. This is a copy of the prenup. Page 17, Section 4. Read it. Wesley's hand shook as he read. His face went from pale to green. This says, if she's proven to have committed adultery or fraud during the marriage, she gets nothing, less than nothing. I can sue her for damages. Alex smiled coldly. Congratulations, Wesley. You're about to help the woman you love destroy herself. But she said, she showed me financial statements. Forgeries. She's good at those. Alex leaned back. Now, are you going to tell me what I want to know? Or are you going to go down with her ship? For the next hour, Wesley spilled everything. The plan was elegant in its simplicity and horrifying in its cruelty. Desiree would present the falsified medical records to a judge, claiming Alex was mentally incompetent and had been embezzling from his own company. Ricardo would be framed as his accomplice. With Alex institutionalized and his business in chaos, Desiree would file for divorce and claim half of everything. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, Wesley said miserably. She's meeting with her lawyer, your former lawyer, actually. Ross Tate. Alex's blood went cold. What did you say? Ross Tate. She hired him last month. Said he knew all your business secrets, could help her maximize the settlement. Alex felt pieces clicking into place. Ross had been asking strange questions lately, requesting access to files he didn't need, scheduling meetings that got canceled at the last minute. His own lawyer had been bought by his wife. Wesley, I'm going to make you an offer. Help me stop this, and I'll make sure you walk away clean. Keep playing Desiree's game, and I'll destroy you both. What do you want me to do? Exactly what she's expecting. Show up tomorrow, play your part. But when the moment is right, you're going to tell the truth. She'll kill me. No, Alex said, standing to leave. I will. The difference is, if you help me, you'll live long enough to regret betraying me instead of dying for it. As Alex walked to his car, his phone rang. The caller ID made him smile. Ross, working late? Alex, we need to talk. There's been a development in your business accounts. Someone's been moving money. Large amounts. I think you might be getting embezzled. Really? That's terrible. Can you meet me at the office tomorrow morning? Early, of course. 8 a.m. Perfect. Oh, and Ross, bring everything you've prepared for me. I want to see exactly how bad this situation is. Alex ended the call and got into his Mercedes. Tomorrow would be the most important day of his life. By sunset, he would either be destroyed or victorious. But Alexander Whitehead hadn't built an empire by accepting defeat. As he drove home to face his wife one last time, Alex thought about justice, revenge, and the price of betrayal. Desiree, Wesley, and Ross thought they were playing chess with an amateur. They were about to learn they'd been playing with a grandmaster. Chapter 7. The Judas Kiss. Alex arrived at his office at 7:30 a.m. to find Ross Tate already waiting in the parking lot. His former lawyer looked nervous, clutching a briefcase like a shield. Through the office windows, Alex could see Sergio setting up recording equipment. Ross, punctual as always. Alex, I have to tell you, what I've discovered is very serious. We need to involve the authorities immediately. They rode the elevator to Alex's office in silence. Ross kept glancing at his watch, sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning cool. Coffee, Alex offered. No, thanks. Let's get right to business. Ross opened his briefcase with shaking hands. I've been reviewing your business accounts, and I've found evidence of systematic embezzlement. Someone has been moving money to offshore accounts for months. Alex accepted the folder Ross handed him, flipping through pages of bank statements and transaction records. The forgeries were masterful. If he didn't know better, he'd believe them himself. My God, Alex said, letting shock color his voice. How much? Nearly $3 million. Alex, I hate to ask this, but do you have any memory problems? Confusion, disorientation? Some of these transactions are authorized with your digital signature. Sometimes I feel foggy, dizzy. I thought it was stress from the Henderson project. Ross leaned forward, his practice concern almost convincing. Alex, I think someone has been drugging you. And I think I know who. Who? Your CFO? Ricardo Sampson. Look at these transaction patterns. They all coincide with times he had access to your computer, your accounts, and with his daughter's medical bills. Alex let silence stretch between them, watching Ross construct the frame that would destroy an innocent man's life. What should I do? I've taken the liberty of preparing some documents, Ross said, pulling out another folder. Power of attorney papers, emergency medical decisions, asset protection protocols. If you're being drugged, we need to act quickly to protect your interests. Alex pretended to study the papers. In reality, they were beautifully crafted legal weapons designed to transfer control of his empire to Desiree, while making it look like protective measures. Ross, you've been my lawyer for 8 years. I trust you completely. I won't let you down, Alex. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sergio entered, carrying a coffee tray and wearing the expression of a man delivering bad news. Mr. Whitehead, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been a development. The police are here. 2 detectives followed Sergio into the office, a heavy-set man in his 50s and a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s. Mr. Whitehead, I'm Detective Sam Watts. This is Detective Brandy Raymond. We need to ask you some questions about irregularities in your business accounts. Ross shot to his feet. Detectives, I'm Mr. Whitehead's attorney. He's been cooperating fully with our internal investigation. Actually, Detective Raymond said, we're here about something else. Dr. Timothy Barry came forward yesterday with allegations that Mrs. Whitehead attempted to blackmail him into falsifying medical records. Alex watched Ross's face go white. This wasn't part of the plan. Furthermore, Detective Watts continued, we've been investigating a fraud case involving a paralegal named Wesley Wilcox. Mr. Wilcox came to us last night with evidence of a conspiracy to commit fraud. Ross looked like he might vomit. I don't understand. It's simple, Alex said, his voice suddenly cold and clear. Wesley decided he'd rather testify against my wife than go to prison for her. Alex, what's going on? Ross stammered. What's going on, Ross, is that I've known about this conspiracy for weeks. Every meeting, every forged document, every lie. Alex stood, his presence filling the room. Did you really think I'd built a $50 million company by being naive? Detective Raymond placed handcuffs on the desk. Ross Tate, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, legal malpractice, and violation of attorney-client privilege. As they read Ross's rights, Alex's phone buzzed with a text from Desiree. Something's wrong. Wesley isn't answering his phone. The hearing is in 2 hours. Alex typed back, don't worry. Everything is going according to plan. Detectives, Alex said, I believe my wife is at the courthouse right now, preparing to present falsified evidence in a competency hearing. You'll want to arrest her before she commits perjury in front of judge. Already handled, Detective Watts said. She was taken into custody an hour ago. Alex walked to his office window, looking out at the city he'd helped build. Behind him, he could hear Ross sobbing as they led him away. In a few hours, Desiree would be in a cell, Wesley would be cutting a deal with prosecutors, and Dr. Barry would be cooperating with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. Boss, Sergio appeared at his elbow. It's over. No, Alex said quietly. It's just beginning. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. The courtroom was packed for Desiree's arraignment. Alex sat in the gallery's front row, watching as his wife of 12 years shuffled and wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. She'd lost weight in the 3 days since her arrest, and her usually perfect hair hung limp around her shoulders. When her eyes found his, Alex saw something he'd never seen before in their relationship: fear. Judge Bernice Coyle was a stern woman in her 60s who'd built a reputation for harsh sentences in fraud cases. She reviewed the charges with barely concealed disgust. Mrs. Whitehead, you're charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted blackmail, forgery, and conspiracy to commit perjury. How do you plead? Desiree's public defender, A harried-looking man named Tim Barry, no relation to the doctor, whispered urgently in her ear. "Not guilty, Your Honor." Judge Coyle set bail at $500,000, knowing Desiree couldn't raise that amount with her assets frozen. As they led her away, Desiree looked back at Alex one last time. He gave her the same cold smile she'd given him for months. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Alex. He'd prepared for this moment, knowing the story would make headlines. Local businessman uncovers wife's conspiracy. "Mr. Whitehead, how does it feel to know your wife was planning to have you institutionalized?" "Betrayal is never easy," Alex said, his voice steady. "But justice is more important than personal feelings. Will you be filing for divorce?" That process began the moment I learned of her crimes. The truth was more complex. Alex had already filed divorce papers citing adultery and fraud, claims that would leave Desiree with nothing under their prenup. But he'd also filed civil lawsuits seeking damages for the emotional distress, business losses, and reputation damage her conspiracy had caused. By the time the legal system finished with Desiree Whitehead, she'd be bankrupt and facing decades in prison. Wesley Wilcox had taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Desiree in exchange for 5 years probation. Clayton Knapp, the private investigator, had flipped so quickly that prosecutors joked he should join the Olympic gymnastics team. Ross Tate was fighting the charges, claiming he'd been deceived by Desiree. But the evidence was overwhelming. Recordings Sergio had made, documents that proved Ross knew exactly what he was doing, and testimony from multiple witnesses. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for next month. Alex would testify about the conspiracy, Dr. Barry would explain the blackmail attempt, and Wesley would detail the plan to destroy Alex's life. But Alex had already moved beyond legal justice. He wanted something more personal. He found Desiree's mother, Maxine Fitzpatrick, at her apartment across town. The elderly woman had aged years in the past week, her face drawn with shame and confusion. "Alexander, I can't believe what she did to you. Mrs. Fitzpatrick, I want you to know that none of this affects how I feel about you. You've been like a mother to me for 12 years. But the children, Emma and Michael, what will happen to them?" Alex had been dreading this conversation. Emma and Michael were staying with his sister while the legal proceedings unfolded. They knew their mother was in trouble, but not the full extent of her crimes. "I'm going to fight for full custody," Alex said gently. "I'll make sure they're taken care of, that they get therapy to help them understand what happened." And Desiree? Desiree made her choices. Now she has to live with the consequences. That evening, Alex sat in his study, looking at a letter that had been delivered by a guard at the county jail. Desiree's handwriting was shakier than usual, but her words were clear. "Alex, I know you'll never forgive me, but I need you to understand why I did this. I stopped loving you years ago, but I was trapped. The prenup, the lifestyle, the expectations. I felt like a prisoner in my own life. I know that doesn't excuse what I did, but I need you to know it wasn't just about money. It was about freedom. Please don't let the children hate me. Whatever happens to me, they don't deserve to lose their mother's memory. D." Alex read the letter 3 times, then fed it into a shredder. Freedom. She talked about freedom while planning to destroy him, Ricardo, and Dr. Barry. She talked about being trapped while systematically betraying everyone who trusted her. His phone rang. Sergio's name appeared on the screen. "Boss, I've got news. The prosecutor wants to meet with you tomorrow. They're talking about a plea deal for your wife." "What kind of deal?" 20 years instead of life. She'd have to testify against Ross Tate and forfeit any claim to your assets. Alex thought about it. 20 years meant Desiree would be in her mid-50s when she got out. Emma and Michael would be adults, their lives rebuilt without their mother's toxic influence. "Tell them I'll consider it," Alex said. "But I want something in return." "What?" "I want her to explain to our children exactly what she did and why. I want them to hear the truth from her own mouth." Alex hung up and poured himself a drink. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing a life, a family, a business. He'd built his empire by understanding that trust was the most valuable currency in the world. Desiree had spent that currency like a fool, and now she was bankrupt in every way that mattered. Chapter 9. Justice Served. 6 months later, Alex stood at the window of his redesigned office, watching construction crews break ground on his latest project, a children's hospital funded partly by the civil settlement he'd won against Desiree. The irony wasn't lost on him. Her betrayal had led to something that would help thousands of families. Emma and Michael were thriving. After months of therapy, they'd accepted that their mother had made terrible choices, but that didn't reflect on them. Emma, now 11, had thrown herself into soccer and school debate team. Michael, 9, was building robots with an engineering kit Alex had bought him. They visited Desiree once a month at the state prison, supervised visits that Alex had fought to arrange despite his own feelings. Whatever she'd done to him, she was still their mother. The trial had been a media sensation. Ross Tate received 12 years for his role in the conspiracy. Wesley Wilcox was serving his probation and working at a legal aid clinic, his dreams of wealth permanently shattered. Clayton Knapp had lost his investigator's license and now worked security at a shopping mall. Dr. Barry had received the lightest sentence, 2 years probation and community service. He'd lost his medical license, but was volunteering at free clinics, trying to rebuild some measure of respect. Desiree herself had taken the plea deal, 25 years with possibility of parole in 15. The federal prosecutor had decided to make an example of her case, showing that fraud and conspiracy would be punished to the full extent of the law. Alex's phone buzzed with a text from Sergio, package delivered. Alex smiled. The package was a complete financial audit of Bright and Associates, the law firm that had employed Wesley and failed to detect Ross's ethical violations. By the time Alex's lawyers finished with them, the firm would be bankrupt and its partners would be lucky to avoid criminal charges themselves. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Ricardo Sampson entered, carrying a financial report and wearing a smile that had become common since his promotion to company president. The Henderson project is ahead of schedule and under budget, Ricardo reported. We should clear $8 million in profit. Excellent. Any word on the Houston expansion? They accepted our bid. $12 million contract to build their new municipal complex. Alex nodded, pleased but not surprised. Whitehead Construction's reputation had actually improved after the scandal. Clients respected a man who'd uncovered and stopped corruption in his own organization. Ricardo, I want you to take the lead on Houston. Consider it your project. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say you'll do a good job, which I know you will. After Ricardo left, Alex returned to his window. In the distance, he could see the courthouse where Desiree's trial had taken place. Closer, he could see the park where he'd taken Emma and Michael last weekend, watching them play while trying to rebuild their family from the wreckage of betrayal. His reflection in the window showed a man who'd aged in the past year, but grown stronger. The naive trust that had once made him vulnerable was gone, replaced by hard-won wisdom about human nature. His phone rang. The caller ID showed his sister's number. Alex, the kids want to know if you're coming to dinner Sunday. Wouldn't miss it. What's Emma making? Lasagna. She says it's her specialty now. Alex smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. Tell her I'll bring dessert. As he prepared to leave the office, Alex thought about the letter Desiree had written him from prison, the one where she'd asked for forgiveness and claimed she'd only wanted freedom. He'd never responded to it. Freedom. She'd sacrificed 12 years of marriage, her children's respect, her future, and her integrity for what she'd called freedom. Now she had all the freedom she could want. The freedom of a prison cell, the freedom of being alone with her choices, the freedom that came with losing everything that had ever mattered. Alex, meanwhile, had discovered a different kind of freedom. The freedom that came from knowing who you could trust. The freedom of building something worth protecting. The freedom of being strong enough to fight for what was right. He thought about calling Desiree,